hello, and thank you for joining us in the salon. I'm Dr. Anna Volkmer, and I'm delighted to be guest hosting today's salon meeting, which is all about finding balance, academia and well-being. As you probably know, in the week we explore research and career tips to get some new perspectives, to educate, entertain, and hopefully give you some new ideas and get a chance to hear yours. Now, we start in this session with a 30 to 40 minute live stream that includes talks from two great speakers. Then we have a bit of a discussion, and then we spend the time joining you in with the live chat to get your thoughts and taking some questions. So we've got two people joining us today, and we're going to get onto some introductions. I'll just mention that our second guests have been having some minor tech issues and will be joining us in a minute. But our two guest speakers are Dr. Sarah King, who will be joining us, and Dr. Eddy Roccati. Hi, Eddy. You're here already.
Hello.
So I'll introduce Eddy first. Eddy is a postdoctoral research fellow at the Wellbeing Dementia Research and Education Centre. Eddy leads two longitudinal epidemiological studies at Wellbeing. The Island Study, linking aging and neurodegenerative disease, and the Tasmanian Healthy Brain Project. Hope I got those right. I will also mention here that Sarah, who's about to join us, is a molecular neuroscientist at the University of Sussex, and she's worked in the USA and is now in Japan. So it's pretty late in the evening over there. We're very grateful to have her. And here she comes, having just introduced her. In fact, it's pretty late in the evening for you too, Eddy, isn't it?
Yeah, 10 p.m. But I had a coffee at 5, so I'm doing good.
You're ready and raring to go. Well, it's midday for us here in the UK. So let me quickly set the scene. In the relentless pursuit of knowledge within academia, where every publication, grant and lecture seems to carry the weight of one's career, how do we actually find balance and maintain our well-being? The pressures to excel are immense, often pushing us to the brink of burnout. So today in the salon, we challenge this academic community to rethink its values and priorities. How can we foster an environment where intellectual rigor and personal well-being coexist together? Let's decide that academic success should not come at the cost of mental health, and consider changes that could transform academia into a more supportive and sustainable space for all. So I'm going to hand over, I think, to Eddy first. Eddy, would you like to share your screen?
Yep, can do.
We'd love to hear all about your perspective on the issue.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Anna, and thank you, Adam, for the invitation to talk here. So yeah, I'd like to talk about, obviously finding balance, academia and well-being. But I'd probably just like to start by challenging that notion that it is actually, a balancing act. The idea that you can, you have to have one and not the other. And I think this kind of mindset probably lends itself to some, flawed justification for, staying late or working on weekends or, burning yourself out in that relentless pursuit of career progression. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of challenge that, and hopefully by the end of my short little slide presentation, we'll begin to think about it not necessarily being a balancing act, but it actually kind of being more like one supporting the other, where, to have a successful academic career and life, you really have to support your well-being, and then that it's more of a cycle than an actual balancing act. So that's what I'm probably going to focus my talk on, give a bit of a research background, and then some more personal kind of insight about my own experience that hopefully people can take away, and some themes may resonate, some themes may not, and yeah, I'll get into it. So I'm from Australia. As Anna said, I'm from the Wellbeing Dementia Centre in Tasmania, which is a little island off the the coast of the mainland Australia. And I'm also part of a national survey group that put together this report last year about wellbeing and workplace culture in academia in Australia. And I'm just going to take you through a few of the themes that survey found. So one of them is employment instability. You know, about 60% are on fixed-term contracts. And of those people, about 60% have less than 1 year remaining. There's overtime. So yeah, almost half of people work 10 or more years on average, often uncompensated. I'm sure a lot of people have familiarity with these. Burnouts, you know, almost 2/3 of people are experiencing personal burnouts, and over half of that is work-related. And well-being, you know, this concept of well-being, which is a little bit of a buzzword at the moment. Over half of these people are classified as having high stress, and a quarter of having severe, moderate anxiety. And in terms of how, you know, we present academia as a, you know, an attractive career or a profession, not many people would advise other people to do it, which is stark and probably a sign of the state of the field. This is also quite surprising to me, the high proportion of people that experience bullying. And for people with a disability or mental health condition, this kind of goes up to almost, you know, 50%. So some quite stark numbers there. And if you look at this on an international scale, this is really resonant throughout. It's very similar experiences being held in academia across the globe. In the States, doctoral students, these people have completed a PhD, are 6 times more likely to experience anxiety and depression compared to the general population. In the UK, 1/4 of doctoral students report poor well-being. Over half of doctoral students in Belgium experience psychological distress. And we have pretty sound evidence from systematic review and meta-synthesis that the themes are omnipresent, and those things of job security, career demands, you know, work-life balance, in inverted commas, relationships, overworking, coping, and privilege. These things are pretty ubiquitous across the board of academia. And what's happening in Australia in a local context is probably very relevant in international context as well. So to address these things, we probably have to think more about, you know, the systems that are in place to create such working environments, and things we can do to kind of remedy that, and also make sure that we're supporting our own well-being so that we can have, you know, the academic career that we strive for. And together with that, I suppose the other thing is, you know, we're all here because we're dementia researchers, and a lot of these themes that are coming out of, you know, the stresses of academia, these are also risk factors for dementia. So, you know, things like depression and stress and anxiety and things, we all know these have biological impacts, and are also going to increase our risk of dementia down the track. So for me, who's an epidemiologist, studying those, you know, that prevention aspect is really important. And I feel like I should be practicing what I'm preaching, because I'm telling people to go and, you know, do these things to reduce their risk of dementia, you know, at the same time as doing all these things that might increase my own risk. So from a personal note, there's a little bit of hypocrisy there. So yeah, some of my own strategies to deal with this. I think throughout my academic career, I've had insight into it. One of the people I used to work with in Melbourne, so I did my PhD in Melbourne, then moved to Tasmania, went on from his PhD that was in molecular biology to study the impact of stress, the impact of doing a PhD on stress in his postdoc. And I've been quite aware of the increased stress of academic life in my own career. This is my own kind of mitigation strategies. Some of these will be relevant for others. Some of them won't. I find physical activity and just being outdoors, being amongst nature, is probably the most healing thing I can possibly do for my own mental health. In Hobart and Lutruwita, Tasmania, we're very lucky to be surrounded by beautiful natural rainforests and forests and landscapes. And, just 10 minutes walk from my desk, I can be on a trail, and I've really kind of enjoyed that aspect of going for runs at lunchtime and things like that. Peer support is extremely important. So having a kind of network of people who you can share the burden with, I think is really fundamental. And people outside of your own space, you might have colleagues that have similar experiences, and you can share information and mitigation strategies with them, but also, sharing these things you're going through with friends and family, because I think, a burden shared is a burden shared. So it really helps to kind of reduce that burden. Being very transparent with your mentors and your supervisors, whoever they might be, I think is incredibly important, and something I've always kind of done in my own career. If is a particularly stressful period at work, then I'm very open with that about my, I'm very open about that with my supervisor. For example, if I've got a grant due, or, I find that I'm thinking about work on weekends or things like that, or if I've, reviewer comments got me down or something like that, I'll always share that with my supervisor, because I think it's good for me. It's good for them to know where I'm at and how things impact me in the long term. And also things in terms of your own career, unis are quite progressive in terms of their kind of academic growth now. You have these checkups, once every 6 months or every year. I think being very honest at those meetings, not just necessarily treating them as like a tick box, let's continue type thing, but actually being quite honest with your supervisor is really valuable. And yeah, define boundaries both in time and in space. So in time, I mean that kind of, the work week, keeping weekends, holy, and trying your best to not touch them in terms of your academic kind of work bleeding into them. And in space as well, now that we're not, working from home full time, being very strict in your boundaries in terms of space. Your home space is for doing home things and not working. And I also totally get that I'm sitting in my living room right now giving this talk, but you have to be flexible in all things as well. And so, yeah, just finally, I'd just like to share some personal kind of insights of what I found. So I mentioned that, physical activity is really important for me. And I think I've tried to align my career with that as well. Physical activity is obviously a leading contributor to dementia risk from all the Livingston and Lancet commissions that are coming out. And so that also is an opportunity for you to use it in engagement. And one of the initiatives I led in 2021 was called Run for the Island. And this was, it was an engagement event. It was primarily engagement, but we also used it as kind of like a promotion of physical activity as a risk factor reduction method for dementia. We did a bit of fundraising, recruitment, and we just had a good time as well. So me and a few friends and colleagues, also researchers from the Wellbeing Dementia Centre, we ran the Tasmanian Trail, which you can see from the map there. It basically goes down through the heart of Tasmania. So it's about 500 kilometres or roughly 300 miles. So we all ran it over 5 days. And yeah, we had all these kind of pop-up talks and things along the way. We had conversations with people about dementia risk reduction. And, we had a wide interest from University of Tasmania. On the last day, we were joined by the Vice Chancellor of UTAS, who was also a keen runner. We had really good feedback from, people across Tasmania about what we were doing. And yeah, it was just one of those moments where I really managed to align, my personal interest and my research kind of interest as well in a really fun and positive way. Other little tips I would recommend, just taking breaks and actually scheduling them in. If you're someone that responds really well to your calendar, put some time away for yourself each day. Make sure you're not going like back-to-back meetings all the time. 3 hours straight can be a drain. And always look for opportunities for fun. You know, we often in academia get to travel for conferences. Look for some fun things you can do around that time. Just on the bottom right there, there's some photos from a recent trip I took to Philadelphia for AAIC. And one of my friends, Dan Ohm, and his little dog, Leo, we went for a hike in the Catskill Mountains in upstate New York before the conference. And we met at the AAIC, you know, 2017. So that's 7 years now. And I think it's going to become a bit of a tradition now, going for a hike with Dan for AIC. And so, yeah, look for opportunities like that. You know, it might not be hiking that is important to you, but anything like that is really valuable. So ultimately, I think, you know, curate your own environments, you know, make the most out of what you can in terms of your academic career, and I suppose to support your well-being, you know, ensure you have the best academic career possible. You really need to prioritize yourself, because the person that you are, you know, at home is the person that's going in and having this career. So put yourself over other things. You know, if you have to make a move for work, make sure it's to an environment that is actually going to support your own well-being. As I said, like, a network is really important. And always look for those growth opportunities. You know, if you can align what you're doing with, you know, some personal growth or development, and look for some opportunities there, I think they're really positive steps. So yeah, that's all I have. I'll stop sharing so others can see.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Eddy. That was brilliant. Did you actually run 100 kilometers a day? Each person, did you run in the entire trail?
We ran, so we had one person running all the time. We ended up running like a half marathon each day. So we did about 100 kilometers each day. And the other 3 people were kind of coordinating, logistics, but also hosting the pop-up sessions. And some people joined us for a little bit. Or, you know, we had the news. So there was a lot of other jobs to do as well as just the running. We had like live tracking and things as well. So people would join in for a little bit and then tag in, tag out. So yeah, it was great. It was great fun.
Brilliant. I was a bit concerned that you'd actually, like, each single person had run 480 kilometers.
Well, maybe we'll do that next time. That could be Run for the Island 2.0.
Yeah, you might need a bit more time. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. And we're going to come to some questions after Sarah's presentation. Sarah, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, I'll see if I can. If I can't, if I can't, then I won't worry. But yes, I think I can. Okay.
Excellent.
Can you see that?
Yes, now we can see it.
Excellent. Great. Cool. So sorry about the confusion with there. I was before I came on the call, I was balancing my work, helping with some homework downstairs on how you'd survive in the Danakil depression, which sounds like a place in Ethiopia that you probably can't survive in. So
wow, that sounds amazing.
So I was a little late to this, but I'm here now and I've got my slides. Another thing is I've kind of taken a more personal perspective on this. So I've not really, like, whereas Eddy was just telling us about his project that he'd done on looking at work-life balance and then his tips and things, I'm really going to just talk about me, I guess, and kind of where my story's taken me, and how there's been points within my career where I've really thought about my work-life balance and made changes or made decisions based on that in order to try and get that balance right, or keep that cycle going, as Eddy described it in his talk. So first of all, this is about well-being. And when I mean that, I'm not kind of talking about mental health problems or diagnoses or stuff like that. It's just that kind of well-being through finding the balance and setting priorities in and out of work. So feeling happy, feeling like you're swimming and not just treading water and surviving, both at work and at home. And I think your choices at work and at home can influence both places. So that's kind of the take that or the direction I'm coming to this from. So the path to where I am now. So this is a quick resume, and then on the next slide, I've got some prompts to kind of say about what happened there. But I did my undergraduate at Bristol University and then moved to Sussex Uni for my master's and PhD. I went to Yale for 7 years for a postdoc, and then came back to Sussex, where I was a lecturer, senior lecturer. I'm now a reader. Hopefully I'll be a professor soon. And I've been at Sussex now for 20 years. So this path through the kind of the higher levels of the academic hierarchy at Sussex is taken quite a long time, and I've spent a lot of time on it. But currently I'm not. I've got a year out, so I'm a visiting professor at Osaka University. So I'm on sabbatical for a year this year, and I guess that's a bit of a decision making for my work-life balance too. So here's some kind of info on how I made this progression through these phases and concentrated either on work or life in different ways. So my undergrad, I went to uni because I wanted to have fun, and I played a bit too hard, that should say there. And I ended up just getting a 2-2, which I got a first on my project though. And I absolutely loved the course and loved what I was doing, but also loved hanging out as an undergraduate and not really doing the assessments I was supposed to do. After I finished uni, I went traveling for a year and a half, and then came back to England with the intention. I always, from university, I always knew I wanted to be an academic. It was like, this is what I want to do. I just love the environment of universities. I love the learning. I loved the kind of research aspect from my undergrad. So I decided that that's what I wanted to do. But with the 2-2 at that stage, it's more difficult now. But then you could get onto a master's and use that as a route into a PhD. So I signed up for my master's, and I concentrated on that a bit more, did well on that, and got into a PhD working on a project that was kind of a continuation of that. And was at Sussex for 5 years in total, with the masters and then the PhD. And as most PhD students do, as most PhD students find it, it was tough. And there were points when I was going to burn out. And one, for example, there, just thinking about work-life balance, I did decide this is too much. I'm never out of the lab. I need to do something else. Why am I doing a PhD? And I was seriously for a while considering giving up. And then I talked to my parents, I think, and I said, I think I'm going to give up on my PhD. I can't do it. And they said, we're so proud of you. You should just do what you want. If you want to give up, that's fine. And I went away, and I had that. They kind of gave me permission to make that decision to give up. And then I thought about it, and I realized I really didn't want to. I was in for the long haul, even if it was tough. And it was kind of getting that permission to give up from an external source made me realize that what I was doing was what I wanted to do. But at that time as well, it was like, I want to do this, but I need to work out how to balance it better. And it was a kind of turning point in my PhD, and things kind of improved from them, because I wasn't kind of looking downhill at it. I was thinking more positively about where it was going to take me again. After my PhD, I was lucky enough to get a postdoc position at Yale in the States, and stayed there for 7 years. And that was a really productive and good time in my academic career. And we can talk about this maybe later, the tension of different places. Like Yale is quite the kind of American Ivy League academic situation maybe feels a bit more high pressure than sometimes it might do in other places. And although I felt that, I was in a really good network of friends and people who were also kind of lab-based and lab-related. So my social life and work life were really intermixed there, and it was a really kind of productive few years. And I had the freedom to enjoy it because I was in another country. I didn't have the pressure of kind of family, buying a house, the kinds of things that you do once you're kind of settling down to life somewhere else. But I did do that once I moved back to Sussex. Again, a job came up in Sussex just as I was thinking about moving on from my postdoc, and it was where I wanted to be. And I was lucky enough to get that back in Brighton as well. And that was when I kind of got back. I got my permanent position. I was like, right, okay, this is it. I'm going to buy a flat. I'm going to put down my roots. This is going to be where I'm going to stay. And that was when I kind of, the work-life balance really kind of kicked in, that actually it's not all about work. I need to have a life outside work as well. And there was priorities that I made there, and in that time, that have probably extended the the pathway to becoming professor, because I focused maybe more on outside, but that outside has allowed me to actually, I think it's been productive for me in work as well. And I think the next slide talks a bit more about some of the decisions that I've made at Sussex for my work-life balance. And one of those has led me to applying for a Leave a Hume International Fellowship. And I'm now in Osaka. I'm here for a year. I've brought my son with me, so he's just enrolled into international school, and that's the homework that we were doing just before I came on the call, because of course it's 8 o'clock in the evening here. It's not lunchtime here. So again, like Eddy, it's not quite the right balance, us working in the evenings, but for something like this, I think it's worth it. And I am having quite a few meetings at odd times in order to kind of catch up with colleagues back home as well. So yeah, so decision points for my life and work. This is all totally personal. So everybody has their own story. Everyone has their own pathway, their own pressures in life, their own things that make their own methods, routines of working, how they do things. And these were decision points for my work-life balance in my life that are just very personal to me. And so they may chime with some people who watch this, or they may be appear to be very different. Whatever way, you can make decisions that suit you and suit what you have to do and what your kind of environment is at home. One of my things is that a lot of my life I've lived overseas. So I grew up from when I was 7 to 15. I lived in Hong Kong. Then I went back to England. Then I went to the States for a postdoc. I'm only in Japan for a year now, but it's still, the idea of coming to Japan is my kind of itchy feet for travel as well, and integrating that into my career. And also there's a kind of, yeah, I kind of have an itchy feet. There's kind of a boredom of being in the same place for a long time. And like I said, I've been at Sussex for 20 years now. And in that 20 years, I've done lots of other things that have relieved that boredom of a single place. But now I've got a year out in it. I feel really revitalized by buying here. At Sussex, like I say, I've been here for 20 years. And one of my biggest frustrations with work is you seem to spend a lot of time, and maybe especially like I'm single now. I've always been single. So I haven't had a partner who has kind of dragged me away from the lab or something to do. So I go out with my friends and stuff like that, but I didn't used to have that tie at home to kind of a reason to go home necessarily after work. And I had this is very personal now, but I had a kind of after I didn't get promoted, when I'd gone for promotion about maybe 5 or 6 years after I started at Sussex, I was leaving the lab quite late one evening, and I just had this kind of dawning that I was going to become a lonely old lady just working in the lab and going home at time. And I didn't want a cat, so I wasn't going to be a lonely cat lady. And I made a decision. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to make a family. I'm going to try and make a family and give myself a life out of work, because having been single all the time, you don't have the opportunity to kind of make a family. But actually, that's something that in the back of my head I'd always wanted. And so I actually went and I'm a solo parent. So using sperm donation, I made a child, and I now have a child who's 13 years old doing their homework downstairs. And in England, we have a cat who's staying with a cousin for the year that we're in Japan, which is a little bit of a point of contention with my son, that we got a cat and then we moved to Japan. The cat's 3, so I didn't get a cat and then move straight to Japan, and we'll have the cat as soon as we get home too. So, and that's a kind of a really big decision that changed my life, and it actually made me have to think more about my work balance as well, because all of a sudden I then had things that were important outside of work as well as inside work. I don't suggest everyone goes off and has a kid in order to sort out their work-life balance, but for me, that was kind of a big trigger or a big event in my life, which made me think about it. And since then, my work-life balance has very much has been better, because I've had this external influence on it. One of the things I did, sorry, I'm probably talking too long now. One of the things I did, when Elliot was about 3, was start flexible working, where I did compressed hours and only worked 4 days a week. So I worked from 8 till 6 Mondays to Thursdays and had Fridays off. And I think the next slide was our first Friday. We went swimming, and then Elliot fell asleep in a cafe, and I sat there on a Friday, 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday, having a cup of coffee, looking out on the lanes in Brighton, thinking, oh, this is the life. Why didn't I do this anyway? But that worked for us because his nursery opened at 8 and closed at 6, and it was awful. Dropping him off and picking him up were real points where he'd always cry, and it always felt really painful. And so only having to do it 4 days a week instead of 5 days a week just made it a lot easier. So for us, that flexible working at that stage was absolutely great. And I did that for 2 years until he started at primary school. And then once he was at primary school, I went back to shorter days and kind of worked more within school hours, plus a few hours after school when he was at he did after school clubs. So I ended up working full days again. But that worked for me. Another trigger point, decision things on work-life balance, was COVID. I mean, working from home as a single parent with then, how old was he? 9 years old. That was tough. And I basically didn't get any research done during COVID. All of my working life was, because I was in quite a senior management position, was looking after Elliot and putting out fires at work and doing a lot of work, but not really research related. And it kind of made me realize that after COVID, I switched back to doing research stuff again, but it made you realize that you can work in different places. And also the world's, if you can't finish a job, the world's not going to end. You can kind of come back to it later, and that's worked quite well. And then the last thing I'll mention here is something very similar to Eddy's run across Tasmania, was that I was in charge of the public program for the BNA Festival in 2023. And with that, I had to do a load of public engagement work, and I absolutely loved it. It was like the best thing ever. And all of a sudden I was like, actually, this is all relevant to my job. I'm being paid for it. It's not directly research, but it's stuff that's part of my job. And it's made me kind of make sure that what I do, I enjoy doing. And I built a lot more of that kind of work into my schedule and made it part of the job. And if you get grants for it, then people are pleased with you getting grants for doing that kind of work as well. So it's not, for me, there's kind of been a little bit of a shift in my focus over the last couple of years. So yeah, I'll leave it there. I think, like, I've just kind of told you about my very quick overview of my personal story through my career and some decision points that for my work-life balance. But I think what's really important is for kind of everyday thinking about this is, don't compare yourself to other people. And it's really difficult to do that because you're always seeing how your as a PhD student or a postdoc, what your kind of contemporaries are doing. Me as a kind of more senior who's just been made professor, why did they get made professor? And I'm still kind of struggling with this or that. It's really easy to compare yourself to other people, but I think that we should try not to do that, because we all have our own situations. We all have our own life story in and out of work, and we need to make sure we're happy in ourselves and not be worrying about what other people are doing. And from that perspective, do what's right for you and make sure you enjoy it. Obviously, not necessarily all the time. You do have ups and downs in kind of research and job satisfaction and stuff like that. But you can find things, you can carve your path through the academic career to do things, to do the bits that you like, work on the research projects that you really want to. If there's a research project that's not working and you don't like it, find a way out of that and do something else. So avoid regrets for what you're doing, rather than that's not, I don't know how that's not avoid regrets. That's not really what I meant. But you don't do what's right. So if it's really not right, then stop it. If it's just a blip in it, then kind of keep going, but find something else to make you enjoy it as you go through. Yeah, if you're not enjoying something, shift focus. That's what I mean. So, and the last thing, I think this is my last thing, is just that, because being a parent, having a kid, having bought a house, looking after that house, managing going to the supermarket, getting our food ready every day, doing our washing and stuff like that. It's interesting when you start counting up the number of full-time jobs that we do outside our work as well as inside our work. And when you think like that, it really is, it's like you have to work out that balance of, you can't spend all your time working, because either at home or at work, because there just aren't that many hours in the week. And so it really is important to draw the line, and kind of calculating the number of full-time jobs you do. It makes you realize where you need to find that balance sometimes. So I'll just leave that there as maybe a talking point for later. Okay, I think that's me done. So I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you for being so open and personal. As a mother of two, including a 13-year-old, I hear you. I share that pain, the juggling of homework and all that jazz. I often sit in, my daughter, who's the 13-year-old, is in a swim squad, and I often sit in the car park working on my computer. And whilst I think, gosh, what am I doing? It's actually really good, because I don't have to go and speak to the competitive parents who are comparing their children, not only comparing themselves, but also comparing their children. And I think that's I just think that's such a valid point. And I was, in fact, Eddy, coming back to you, I actually know Dan. You had a photo of yourself and Dan going hiking. And in 2016, I went to Chicago when he was doing his PhD with Marcel Meselem at Northwestern. And I met him there. He's such a good bloke. And I made a number of friends over there. I mean, he's in a bit of a different industry than me, insofar as I'm a speech and language therapist in dementia. But I met some of the speech therapists, and I've got lots of friends who I do things with, like you do, Eddy. But sometimes, it's a bit like parenting. It's sometimes really difficult not to compare yourself to others, or your child to others, or compare where you're at in your career to others, or just, it's really hard not to. So I kind of wondered, Eddy, how do you maintain these friendships without comparing yourself and getting a bit competitive?
Yeah, good question. And yeah, if you've met Dan, I reckon if you met his dog Leo, you'd say the same thing. Because Leo's just the cutest little bundle of joy. I think the answer probably comes from something Sarah alluded to, which is that, you know, we are doing so much more than just the jobs that we work in academia. And I think, you know, the comparison you make when you measure yourself up against you know, the professor or the reader or the person two promotions ahead of you or one promotion behind you, is that you are comparing your research life with their research life. And the person that, you know, is sitting in that research environment, it's a completely different person outside of that. And, you know, they might be, you know, their other full-time jobs that they're working, to use Sarah's analogy, might not be, you know, anywhere near as you know, valid or as fulfilling as your own kind of non-academic job. So when you're comparing yourself against other people, which I think is a biological drive, like there's no person on the world that's lived their whole life without comparing themselves to another person. It's just not a thing. And I think evolutionary biology and psychology will tell you why we have that inbuilt in us. But I think, you know, when you're comparing your research life to another person's research life, you might be missing something, an aspect of that person's life that you're comparing to, that they might look upon your own life and actually admire your aspects and your job outside of academia, you know, the way you've raised a child, or, you know, what you do on the weekends or things like that. So I think, yeah, we're not going to get anywhere by comparing ourselves, because, you know, we're all unique people that have unique needs. But
the grass is always greener on the other side, no matter where you
no,
are.
I know, and I do that. I hear about some PhDs people are doing now. I'm just like, oh, that just sounds like the coolest thing in the whole world. But it always is that kind of, that it's like the honeymoon period of doing a PhD, when you just start out and everything's so novel and amazing and fascinating, and then you grind and some more. So yeah, there's always that grass is greener, but that'll remain like that.
I think so. And even when Sarah came on the call and was like, oh yeah, I'm in Osaka, I was like, oh, I wish I could do a year in Osaka.
I said the same thing. Sarah and I caught up the other day, and I said the same thing. I was so jealous.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm just trying to get to like a more professorial level, so I can do a proper sabbatical, not for anything else. But actually, yeah, exactly. I have a colleague here, and they were asking whether, and maybe this is one for both of you. Do you think it's my colleague is doing a PhD, and they were saying, do you think it's really worth having a PhD supervisor but a separate mentor, or do you think it's all right if they come into one role? I don't know. Do either of you have a kind of opinion on that in terms of maintaining well-being and balance?
I think so. I was the in charge of the PhD students at Sussex all the way in psychology at Sussex, all the way through COVID. So I was the director of doctoral studies for 5 years. So I spent quite a lot of time then with like kind of working with PhD students and supervisors, if there were kind of like, if there was some conflicts or things like that, or just like somewhere it worked really well, but the PhD students wanted and needed to talk to other people as well. And I think it really depends on the student and the supervisor, that sometimes it will work beautifully and the relationship just works and they don't need anyone else. But for other students, they might not ask for it because they don't want to ask for things, but they really do need that third party who can who probably doesn't know very much about what their research is that they're doing, but can just talk about the other things to do with, or the pathway of doing a PhD, and not stressing when you're in that or getting on with that grind, or not stressing if you're in a period where you're not in it and you feel like you're unproductive, because things can change. And talking kind of about the process and getting the work-life balance, I think, is really important. But who that person is, whether it's a kind of a mentor that's given to the student, or whether it's a mentor that you find for yourself. My issue is that people often, the people who need it most, maybe don't find it for themselves because they don't think to ask, or they don't want to ask, or they don't think they're worthy of it or something. And so I think the two supervisor system, where every student gets two supervisors, is sometimes a bit forced, because that's often research related and maybe one person doesn't know about it. But I think it's good from the perspective that there is someone else who they can talk to.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Do you think then, because you've sticking with you, Sarah, you've moved institutions. So I know, Eddy, you have too, but you've moved institutions several times, Sarah. Do you think that's helpful for well-being? I mean, it sounds like it was helpful for Eddy, but I don't know, Sarah, do you?
The moving institutions has been was helpful for me, because I do get itchy feet.
Yes,
and so all of my life, I seem to do something. I seem to move every 7 to 8 years, kind of like when I went to Hong Kong as a teenager, and then I went back to England, and then I went traveling, and then I came to Brighton and did my PhD, and then I went to America, and then I came back to Sussex, and I've been here for 20 years. But in that 20 years, I then had Elliot. So that was like my next, like having that's my next life-changing event outside of, like, some of them were work related, some of them are kind of having a child related and things like that. But he's 13, so I've kind of like, I'm out of my cycle. But coming here for a year is just feels so refreshing, because it's like I'm so out of that environment, which I didn't dislike, but it will be really, it's nice to have a break for a year and then go back to Brighton, go back to my house, go back to my normal life, and just feel refreshed, I think.
I feel like
that's me, because I've got itchy feet. Other people, I think there's also that pressure that, I mean, I knew I wanted to go and do a postdoc in the States when I was doing, because that's what and it was like, because doing a postdoc in the States is really good for your career, but also I want to go and live somewhere else. I want to go and live in a different city. I want to go and do something different. And I think that's difficult for people who have family lives or have commitments that keep them in one place, so they don't have that opportunity to move. And then now that comparing yourself to other people, they're looking at me going off and, oh no, now I'm in Japan, and thinking, oh God, maybe you need that for your career. And I don't think you do. I think that I've seen enough people in, like, because now I'm hopefully will get to the final, be professor before long, but there's enough people who I've seen being promoted up that pathway and who have made it, who have never left Brighton. So Robin Banerjee, who's the pro vice chancellor at Sussex, did his undergraduate at Sussex, and he's never been anywhere else. And he's now the kind of second most important person in the university or whatever in terms of the hierarchy. And he's never left. And he's just the most brilliant person and the most kind of like best colleague, and is, I don't know how many years younger than me in that, but I'm not comparing myself. But
don't compare yourself.
So that whole thing of kind of where you go and what you do, it's not, again, it's for every individual, needs to do what's right for them. And it's possible to achieve in any of those different places.
I hear you completely. It really resonates with what you're saying. Eddy, I'm pondering, because Sarah and I are sitting here saying, oh, we've got kids and it's balanced. But do you think that sometimes when you're somebody who doesn't have a family, that can then mean everyone goes, well, you don't have kids, you can work the extra hours, or you can do the extra bits, or you haven't got any other, you're just a runner. It's like you can do that anytime. Do you think do you think that imbalance happens sometimes in academia?
Yeah, for sure. I think, like, when they call it like portability or freedom, and having less things to tie you down probably looks from the outside like something that is going to, boost your career and, get to places where other people are not going to get to. But I think Sarah's living proof that, you can have it the other way around. You can do whatever you want wherever you want. I mean, people can come along for the journey, because it is a family traveling, not just an individual. For me, moving down to Tasmania was really opportune and serendipitous. I'd just finished my PhD, and I'd been with the same supervisor from honours to PhD. I was ready for a change, academically, but also ready for a change environmentally. I'd been living, a stone's throw away from Lygon Street for 10 years, and I was just kind of over it. And Tasmania was an easy decision to make, because it was, a postdoc with someone that I really admired, and someone who, or like a research institute that is quite unique in, it's a leading kind of dementia research education, but it's also, there's only like 200,000 people that live in Hobart. So it's, in terms of like the environment around it, it's not really a city. It's more like a kind of country town, with a really good neuroscience institute. So it kind of was perfect. I wanted to move out of the city. I wanted to do more kind of hiking and outdoorsy stuff. And where I'm working now is much more kind of, you go to the tea room and everyone's kind of talking about the adventures they had on the weekends and the outdoors. And that's much more my vibe than Melbourne or, another big city. So I'm definitely jealous about the people that go, travel across the world and do all these amazing positions and learn so much things about, academia internationally. But I'm pretty happy in Tassie for now. Yeah.
Great. I was smiling earlier because I was telling Eddie that I used to live in Melbourne. I lived there for 5 years. So I know exactly where he was living, off Lygon Street. I was in Albert Park. That was a coincidence. I actually managed to go to Australia in my clinical role. So I came to academia as a mature student. So I was able to work as a speech and language therapist over in Melbourne. And what I've really noticed actually is that my well-being improved becoming an academic, being in the National Health Service. I still work one day in the National Health Service in the UK, but I found it much more, I found that, and this speaks to what you both have kind of said about, I think maybe, Sarah, you said it right at the end, do what makes you happy. And certainly that decision to move into academia made me happier. And I found it to be in many ways a lot more balanced than working in health, which is in the health service, which is an interesting dynamic. Eddie, before we move on, we should probably think about finishing up in a few minutes. But I wondered, my colleague had another question, and perhaps it kind of comes back round to the beginning of your talk, where you presenting us with those lovely stats. And you were saying about the number of students, PhD students who, the mental health and well-being amongst PhD students. And I wondered if my colleague wondered if in this digital age, when PhD students essentially cannot escape. I know you're in your, I mean, you're both in your homes. I'm the only one who's, it's the time differences. I'm in the work, in a building at work, but you can't escape, can you? So if, your work follows you home on your phone, and your emails that pop up on your phone, and as soon as you open a device. Eddie, do you think, is there a difference in stats at different times in terms of that, or not? Has that not been reflected,
Yeah, I think you're bang on there. I'm not aware of the specifics of timing and how important it is, but I think a similar sort of thing is playing havoc through primary school, high school, social media, and bullying and things that's going on. The social media aspect of it is bringing it home, constantly, and it's not just going to school and getting bullied now. It's like getting bullied like when you're at home and on your phone and things, and that kind of that juxtaposition, that kind of line in time and space that you want to draw between your home self and your work self. I think that's become really blurred, and I think it's not necessarily COVID had a lot to do with it. COVID I think was a bit of a catalyst for some of these things happening, and the lines getting a lot more blurred. But now we're kind of through that, and I think we should all be reverting to a way of life where we're taking small steps to make that boundary a bit more defined now. And I get this talk, and these themes are wrought with hypocrisy. But one of the things that I was doing at the start was, this was not the start. This is like maybe a couple of years ago. But I had my phone, and I had emails on my phone, and my calendar on my phone, and I had the work chat on my phone. And when I go to go get a coffee, which is like a 5-minute walk from work, I would check my emails like at the stop sign, like we're just waiting for the person to go green and cross the light. I was reading my work emails and just like scrolling, and this kind of doomsday scrolling had transitioned to my work emails, and I was like, what the heck? One day I just had this like epiphany. I was like, what the heck am I doing? Like, I'm going to go get coffee sometimes like with people, and it's like a social thing, but I'm checking my emails on the way. So looking for things like that, trying to catch yourself in the moment, think, is this good for my mental well-being? Like, just make that more of like a habit, a bit more mindful in your approach to interacting with your work life and your non-work life. and trying to catch yourself in those moments and trying to, you know, reduce those moments and increase the kind of the frequency of those like positive moments where, you know, you might take a deep breath and like, you know, have a little calming kind of visit to the coffee shop, as opposed to I just read this horrible email that now I'm going to think about the whole walk back. So yeah, just trying to find those little moments to develop that line, make it a little bit more strict, I suppose.
That's a really nice note to end on, that we should all find a line and that we're comfortable with. It might be a wiggly line at different days of the week, but different times of our lives. But I think that's a really nice way to put it. So I'm going to end the stream. So thank you so much for joining us for this salon session. It's been very confirming for me, and also I'm sure that all our listeners will take away lots of tips and hints. Find yourself a line, prioritize what you want, make sure you're doing it for the reasons that you want to, and you might need to do different things at different times of your life for different reasons, and that's totally fine. So thank you both, and goodbye, everybody.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
How do we get out?